Hello, this is Christian. Welcome to Angular. In this video, let's take a look at the reactive form validation in Angular and see how that works. So here is the form that we're working on. Now, if you haven't watched the other video about the template-driven form validation, I would highly recommend you watch that first because I went through a really good description of how to validate and how that works. But let me just show you really quick here. Press F12 to show you the information here. I mentioned really quick here. So this is the template-driven form, and I mentioned that in this field you have, if you click on it, you see that it has these classes built into the Angular system, the ng-untouched, pristine, and invalid. And the reverse of these are really just touched, dirty, and valid. Okay, and these are the classes that are used to validate your form. So whatever these are, the state of any of these elements inside your form, if it's an invalid, then the entire form is considered as invalid. That's why at the form level, you see that it has the same information as invalid. As soon as I make the requirements, and you see the error messages, now it's all valid. So you can see that the form is now has been touched. Is no longer pristine because I modified the data. Touch me, I did touch in the form fields, and also is valid now. So because it's valid, the button is now activated. We make that in the previous video to be inactive if it's not valid. So if I go and remove one of these, you can see that the entire form is now invalid, so I cannot click on it, right? So that's the whole idea of validation here. So we can go and take a look at inside the template first, and then we'll move on to the reactive form to show you the comparison between the two here. So here in the template-driven form I showed you last time, you see that everything here occurs in the template. I did not touch anything in my code, in the source code, so in here remains intact. I add nothing here. But in the template here, I created a variable for the name field called %name, bind that to ng model, and that means whatever the value I have, I can also act it as get the data here. Also, this name property attribute have access to all the properties associated with this name tag, and I get the errors from the name.errors. I check for the validity of that form field and whether it's dirty or has it been touched, right, and so on. And the out button, if you see down the bottom here, we check the form to see if it's invalid or if it's valid. If it's invalid, then disable it. Otherwise, enable it, right? That's what we did here. So you see that I access these properties to the name which I give as a reference to a particular element. I did not do for the input down here, but it's the same fashion. So let's go over to the other form, the reactive form here, and we'll do the same here. Now, this is a little bit different in using the reactive form because, well, again, the key thing is that the data and the controls, you have controls inside the source, not in the template here. Okay, and it works in a very similar fashion, but as soon as you start using form groups, form groups here, then it gets a little bit tricky. But if you understand the process of object-oriented programming, classes, how to use a getter and setter, I'll show you what that means. And this is still the same way. Okay, so that means in here, notice over here I can create a variable called like that, right? Over here though, I can't do that because the name is already bound to this control and to the object here in the source code. So I have to get this field input, I have to get it from the source code or from the source. I can get that from this form object, which is in the code bound to this object here, right? Or this variable, which contains all the fields inside here. So I can go and say myForm dot, these are called controls, so controls dot name dot whatever, right? And to get that, so in over here, I have to say something like, and notice I don't need to add anything here like I did over there, right? I don't need a pound sign, all those stuff. I don't need to because it's already in the source. So I'm going to go over and copy just the messages here, okay? Copy that and put it into the same area here. But notice I cannot access the name directly. I have to go through my form. So I have to say myForm dot controls dot name dot invalid, okay, to get there. Because so to do that, you have to do all of that just to make this work. And you can see this can be very tedious. And if I did that, then that's fine. Then down here too, right, the very bottom for the class, the button, I have to say I did not do that, but the button here, I can also add another one here to say disable it if this is true, that not controls but just the form, myForm.invalid. Okay. If that's invalid, then disable the button. Okay, so that's done. Now let's go to the page and see how that works. And I'm going to navigate to the reactive template. All right, so let's see if this is still working. And if I touch that, I leave, you see that same message shows up beautifully just like before. If I type a letter and then 2 characters required and so on, right? So these requirements are, where are they? Because again, we have these inside the source code, in the code, right? We did not put that in the template. So if you look back here, I did not put the minimum requirements like I did for the other one here. Like this one here, I put the minimum requirements and it's required. Well, the data here, the controls are inside the source code or in the source because we have control in the source. And here I put required and minimum length. Now the other two, notice I did not put any validation there, so those should be pristine and it should be good and they're valid. So all I need to do is just basically validate this field. Okay, and again, it's a lot of typing because now I have to go through, the form dot name controls dot name. You can do that, or you can also have a function call myForm dot get and then to get the name as well. Okay. So instead of doing this way, which is fine in this case, you want to make it simple and short. You could go through and in the code write a function as a getter and use it here. Okay, so let's go and see how that's done to make it a little bit shorter. But go back here, and so because again this is a class, so I can write getters and setters, right? I can put it right here. I can say get a function. If I want to go through, for example, if I want to go through something like f.name, okay, like my form.name, and then form that like that, make it a little bit shorter. I replace the form controls basically with the f. The f would be like a variable, kind of like this one over here, right? Make it short. But this is a function I can define inside this code. So if I go back, and here I say I'm going to get a function called f, and this function here returns this myForm dot controls, and then so this part I replace that, right? Save this, replace it with just the f. So everything now works just like before. If I save that and go back, everything should just like before. No problem, right? Here we go. Same as before. So so far so good, right? And then so that's that. And you can also, instead of saying f, I want to use exactly the same as the other one. Like name that, username that. To do that, you do the same way, except instead of saying f, you can call it, maybe I have another function down here. I can call this like name. And instead of just the form controls, which forms.name, returns the name field. And then you can do the same for the other ones. So now I have that function or that variable to use, and so I can remove all the f's and I just use the name now. So we're back to where we were like the other one, right? But you have to go the extra step to create that function yourself to make it work. And you can see that now if I go back and work on it, it should still work just fine. Okay, so you can see that it works great. All right, so that is how you would do it if you're using a form group. Now, if you don't use a form group, then the effort is a little bit less. Okay, so for example, if I take this out and move it into the space here, okay, and I can't have duplicates, so I'm gonna just basically for now, well, I this name is duplicate. I can use the function here. So let me turn all these off here. Turn all these off. And I'm not doing any submissions here. So, and so turn this into variables. And then this is for using just the controls, not in the form group. Okay. So now I have the direct access to the control using the name, username, and email. But in my template, I have to change a little bit. I cannot use this, so I'm going to remove my form control. Remove that, right? And then now, instead of this form control name, I have to bind that to the form control. So you just basically modify a little bit here. And I'm going to copy this and replace it with this one here and this one here now. So I'm all set. And the name will stick. Okay. If I go here and copy this, put it inside the email as well. I didn't have any validation there, so this wouldn't matter. But if I did, then it would occur as well. I can say username, place it right here, username, and so on. Okay. So very quickly, and let me just go back and just add one validation to the username as well. Put it here, add to the username. So the first property is a variable is the value, and the second is the validation. The third is also validation, but it's the asynchronous method. So here we do the synchronous method here. So save that. So my username and name both have validations. I can take that. I can make it so that it's 3 characters instead of 2. Okay. So now if I go to the code, well, let's just say it requires 3 letters. All right, let's see what happens. And the button here, it doesn't work because I took out the form. I have to do it differently. But anyway, so you can see that it touched, and then I did not validate correctly. But you can see that it shows the letter information here. And then for the username as well, you can see that I touched it, and it shows the information. Okay, so let me see. I think the code has some example, some incorrect names in here. Not sure what happened there. Yeah, not sure what happened there. But you see that if you take out the form group, then you can access the name directly without having to write functions or things like that in the code, because this already has a direct control over that. But again, if you have a form, then usually you put it to a group because it's easier that way. You can move the form and then everything comes with it without having to do that manually yourself. So that is one of the 2 ways how to validate forms. There are many more. You can do your own validation, your custom validation as well. You can write functions for that. You can also have another method to build forms in a more efficient way using Form Builder, which I haven't learned yet. I mean, I haven't created a video yet. Maybe in a separate video we'll do that. But at least so you know that these are the 2 different ways how you can validate form based on the template-driven or the reactive form type.